I'm just trying to see if I can get one of these batteries to take any charge. It's not looking very promising so far, but I thought it was worth a try. So each of the batteries, when I got them, they were, I think this one was 1 volt and the other one was 0.8 volts. So they're pretty low, but they're not, you know, dead flat. First thing I tried was this thing over here, which is a car battery charger, but it just wouldn't do anything for me. And I noticed that as soon as I connected it up, the voltage on the battery just dropped like almost to nothing, as if it was just shorting it somehow. And it's got a sort of a boost switch on there, or an automatic, and neither of those did anything different, and didn't actually seem to make any difference whether it was switched on at the mains plug over there or not either. So I'm thinking that maybe this battery charger is just stuffed. It is one that I've had for about 10 years, and I think 10 years ago was the last time I used it. I had it in storage while I was overseas, so perhaps this is just stuffed. So next thing I tried was this, and this allows a little bit more control. It has a lead acid battery setting, which didn't work. It said over voltage, which I think actually means under voltage. It's not very good on the error messages, this one. Then I tried it on the nickel metal hydride setting, which lets you manually set, say, 200 milliamps current or something like that. And that would start, but immediately it would say connection break, which is a bit strange. So I'm not sure what that was about. So next thing I tried was this, which is one of those like constant, or you can set the voltage and the current manually. Just powering this off a LiPo at the moment. Obviously I'll need to figure something out a bit better for that to power it longer. Now what this one is doing is, if I just plug it in here, you should see, as soon as I plug it in, voltage drops a fair bit, and I'll turn it on. Quite hard to see, unfortunately. So I have set this, geez, you'll just have to take my word for it, but I've set it to 3 volts 200 milliamps, and when I turn this on, the voltage on the battery just pegs itself at 3 volts immediately, and the current says 0.01 amps. Oh, there we go. So yeah, what's up with that? Is it just a short circuit or something? Like, it can't be a complete short circuit. I mean, if it was a short circuit, we wouldn't be seeing the 1 volt on the battery when I turn the charger off. And the other thing is, if I leave this on for a few minutes, it does actually raise the voltage of the battery when I turn it off. So maybe even just that length of time is enough. So I'll just turn this off and disconnect that, and now you'll see we've got more than 1 volt, but it's dropping fast. So I'm not really sure what to do at this point. Maybe these batteries are just completely a lost cause, but what I will do is I'll put this up to a higher voltage, maybe something that it can't jump to immediately, say 9 volts or something like that, and eventually try and work up to 12 volts or so, and see how much charge it can take and how long it can hold it for. Okay, I've set it to 13 volts, and at this voltage the current actually does come up a little bit. Total power output is half a watt. So I think I'll just leave it here for a while and just see what happens. By the way, just before I said I was surprised that it jumped up to 3 volts immediately, I shouldn't have been, because this power supply, that's what it does. So yeah, sorry about that. It's been running for about 40 minutes now. I had it set to 13 volts and 500 milliamps current limit, and it's finally hit the current limit, so it's charging at 500 milliamps now, 6 watts, and that makes it 12.8 volts. So the voltage is now varying to keep the current constant. And still, when I take this off though, the voltage drops pretty quickly. But I think I might try swapping it over to one of these other battery chargers now, just in case now that the voltage is up a bit higher, they'll be able to take it and run with it instead of giving up immediately. I tried each of those chargers again. This one it just seems to be completely broken. It just doesn't do anything at all. So I've given up on that one. But fortunately this one has found it in its heart to finally start charging. This is on the lead acid battery setting. Oh, can you see that? So it's lead acid battery, 6 cells, charging at 1 amp just for now. I might increase it a little bit later on. And it's settled at about 14 volts doing that. So that's quite nice because that is running off mains power, so I don't have to run it off lipos anymore. So that is looking slightly promising for now. I ran it at 1 amp for about 3 hours, and then I bumped it up to 1.5 amp for another 3, maybe 4 hours or so. And it's a bit hard to see there, but it's sort of sitting at about 12.3 volts and 1.5 amps or so. So now the moment of truth, I guess, is to stop the battery charger and do it, put it onto discharge instead of charge. Now it's going to be 500 milliamps discharge now. Hey, that's not bad. Oh, no, it's going down, but it's not plummeting. Oh, that's not too bad. So here's the main central wiring harness part. I managed to power this up. I just used this DC power converter there, and it powers up and the screen comes on. It's a nice colour screen actually. I was quite surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be colour. So it seems to be alive and working, but I'll show you that in a minute. But let's just have a look at what we've got here. Simplest parts first. This is going back to the reclining or the tilt motor. It's just 2 pins there. So it's probably just PWM DC going one way or the other to, you know, reverse the motor. This is the sensor that I cut off. That's over here, and it's just got a little ball inside there that opens and closes the switch, and this one is also just 2 wires there, so it's just a simple switch, I think. And if we look at the label on the cable, it says drive lockout. Come on, there we go. So presumably that just stops you from driving when the chair is tilted too far backwards. Kind of makes sense. I mean, you couldn't see where you're going, probably. Anyway, so those are there. Have this thing here, which is part of this G-Track thing, and I had to look this up on the net to see what this was all about. And it turns out this is just a gyroscope. And the purpose of this is so that when you have your wheels on different surfaces, so one wheel you have good traction and one wheel you have a slippery surface, and you're trying to go straight forwards without a gyro or anything for the chair to sense that it's because the slippery wheel wouldn't go anywhere and the wheel with good traction would go somewhere, so you just sort of turn, but it's able to sense that, and I guess it slows down the more traction wheel to help the lower traction surface wheel to grip a little bit better or something. This has 4 wires. So I'm guessing that might be an I2C device, I'm not too sure, but we'll be able to figure that out later on, hopefully. Now, over here we have, this is the joystick unit, and that comes into this section here, which is, if I managed to get this open before, let me see if I can do it again. It seems to be just like some sort of a bus where all of these things will connect together to common connections. So there's a six pins in total going in there, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I think each of these sections can be pulled off, and then actually I didn't check this before I started recording, but yeah, okay, so they just sort of plug in there, and you can stack more of them on top of each other as necessary. So this one here labelled SA node could be just taken out altogether, and of course I had to look up what SA node was, and that stands for single actuator node, and let's put this back on here. So if I understand that correctly, it means that it lets you control the tilt of the chair through this, and we'll show you on the screen in a little bit how you can switch between doing that with this button. But this seems to be the cheapest of the controllers that you can get for these chairs, the lowest of the low end range. But apparently this SA node thing, which is this bit, see there it says MK6 SA node. Apparently this bit, if you stack it on here as a expansion thingy, it somehow lets you control the tilt of the chair through this instead of having to have a separate controller. So it's probably not really too important for me, but anyway, that's what it does. And over here we just have the main power coming in. Two chunky big connectors there. So let's turn this on and have a look at the screen so you can see something happening. Okay, I've set my DC power supply to 24.5 volts. This is the power supply that has a dial on it that you can adjust. And when we turn it on, we get this. Hold on a second. You know, that's really weird. When I tried this yesterday evening, it came up with the correct time, which I thought was pretty amazing since it's been sitting there for 6 or 7 years. But for some reason now it's asking me to set the date and time, which is a bit odd. But we can, I guess we could set the time. I'm just using the joystick here to do that. Whatever. Anyway, so we have drive modes, and we select those with this this button like that. So the 4 drive modes are just sort of different configurations. So there's the indoor, which is a little bit slower, outdoor, which is a little bit faster, and then there's this speed, which is a little bit faster again, I guess. And then 4 is for when you're climbing up ramps, so maybe it's a little bit slower and it tries to give you more torque somehow. Not too sure, but we'll figure that out. And the button, when I push the button, it just switches between driving the chair itself and driving the tilt of the seat. So now I can just use the stick to go forwards, tilt the seat forwards or backwards. And that's it. That's the whole thing. It's pretty simple. So if I push that again, it goes back to my drive mode, whatever I had that on. So the only other thing that we can see on here is a battery meter, and I found that 24.5 put this at about halfway. It does not seem to update in real time though. If I turn this off and I reduce the voltage to 23.2 and I turn it on, you'll see that the... Damn it, why do I have to do this again? Now you'll see that the battery is very low, so I guess about 23 volts is the lowest it's going to consider to be a usable voltage. But if I turn it back up to 24.5 now, nothing happens. So it's on 24.8, but nothing changed. So presumably it just sort of does this voltage check refresh thing only occasionally. So this is 24.8 volts. So I haven't actually figured out what it considers to be the maximum yet. Here's the main ESC and control unit. It's got a nice set of plugs there, very, very tidy. It all comes apart very cleanly. It's quite heavy. Interestingly, this one on the far left, this is the control that goes up to that joystick unit. There's only 4 pins in here. Very interesting, eh? Yes, okay, not much to look at there. Here is the sticker on the front, if anybody's interested. This is rather interesting, I thought, made in New Zealand. Most of the rest of the wheelchair has stickers on it saying made in Ohio in the US, and there's a lot of imperial sized bolts and nuts on it, so I think most of it came from the United States, but I don't know why that says New Zealand. That's really strange. There are a few pieces that say made in China, by the way, just in case you were wondering. So I was going to open this up, but unfortunately I will void the warranty if I do that. Let's go. Very nice waterproofing on here, by the way. See the red seal in there? That's nice rubber seal. I lifted this out just now, and it was a little bit anticlimactic. I thought I was going to see something huge and chunky on this other side, but when I lifted it out, this is where almost all of the weight is. And what I said about these transferring heat, that turns out to be not the case, because the heat is coming from these transistors there, directly pressed up onto here. And this, you can sort of see, oops, let me just put that there. You can see this here, it's sort of molded aluminium, I guess. And there's some fins on the other side of that bit there. But it looks like this bit here might actually just be solid block of metal. Huh. It's quite heavy. So anyway, on here we have a few big capacitors and some rather smaller than I expected transistors there. Looks like there's four on each motor. I'm not really one to be looking at circuit boards like this. You want to ask that RC Model Reviews guy for this kind of details, but I can tell you that that is some sort of a microprocessor there by the looks of it. I'm just guessing, it looks like one. It's got lots of pins on it anyway. What is that for? What is this thing here with the metal can around it? I don't know. What is that? It looks... yeah, I don't know what that is. So then there's just some connections out the back. Some kind of a relay perhaps in that grey box. Some polyfuses. Is that what those things are? Just ask me, guys, if you want to know what's going on. And then some capacitors over there. Yep. Anyway, so did that help? So that's what's inside. Let's put it all back together before we break something. Okay, it's the next day now. I've done the same thing for both of these batteries, so they've both probably had about 8-9 hours or so of charging. At maximum, I used 2 amps on this charger to charge them. And after settling for a while, they tend to settle, or with unloaded, you know, with no load on them, they tend to settle at around 11.5 to 11.8 volts each. So they're both in the same state at least, which is, I guess that's kind of helpful. But I had a good suggestion in the comments of my first video, which was to, once you've got them to this point, put them back in series again and then try using the 24 volt charger to charge them from that point on. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to plug in all the necessary bits from this rat's nest of wires to get that underway. Alright, I have the batteries hooked up in series again now, and that is giving me just on 23.6 volts, which is enough to run this fairly well. And it's giving me 2 bars of battery status. I'll just turn that off, and now the moment of truth, we switch this on. Makes a humming noise, and it looks like it's doing its job. Ooh, 27, huh? It's been charging for, I guess, about 4 hours now, and it seems to settle on about 20, well, just above 26, 26.1, 26.2, somewhere around there. And it has a LED on there. You can see it has high charge, low charge, battery ready, and as it says on there, it's a constant voltage battery charger. So it's just setting it to 26.2 volts or so, and then adjusting the current as necessary up to maximum of 8 amps, I presume. So 4 hours and still no sign of any change in this LED. So I'll just leave it running. I mean, it's making a nice humming noise. It's a little bit warm, but it seems to be working fine. I've stripped the chair down to basically just the chassis, the wheels and the motors. I'm just sort of looking at it a little bit. The motors have these connections here. The 2 on the outside are for the power to run the motor. The 2 on the inside are some kind of sensor. I think they're sensing when this switch push. Yeah, so the switch closes when you put it in the push position. So I guess that lets it know, the switch lets it know not to bother spinning the motors when you use the joystick, I guess. I mean, there's no point otherwise. But I think there's a little bit more to it, because I used my multimeter to check if these two pins in there were just simply this switch, and they're not. There's no continuity regardless of whether the switch is open or closed. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on in there. So the battery's holding at just under 25 volts, so I thought I might plug it in. Okay, I have everything hooked up as it was originally now. I have not had any success getting the main motors to go, but I did manage to get the tilt motor to go. And I've discovered the meaning of a few of these errors. So you see at the bottom it says control inhibited at the moment. Initially it said left brake fault, and after that it said right brake fault. And it seems to be that that's just when you have this, when you have it into push position, when you start it up it says left brake fault, if it's a left motor, so on. So that's all that was. And then after that I had a problem that said G-track fault. Now the G-track is this gyro unit here. I had it just sitting like that, and when you start up, you just start this up again, it says G-track fault, I think, yeah, G-track fault. And I think that's just because it's not just a gyro, it must have an accelerometer in there as well, because when I stand it up like this, which is the position it's supposed to be in when the chair is not tipping over, around about vertical, and then we start up again, now that G-track fault doesn't show up. It still says control inhibited for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why now, but I'm just wondering if there's another accelerometer inside this ESC unit that is also the wrong direction at the moment, so maybe that's also inhibiting it perhaps, I don't know. I'll have to look on the internet, or maybe I'll just tip that up the right way and put everything back on the chair as it's supposed to be and see what happens. But as far as the motor on the back of the chair to tilt the chair goes, if I switch into that mode and then try and move it, initially it does nothing, but when I try it again, now we can move the chair. It's kind of slow, but it's very powerful. Not sure how far back it goes, but you can see it's working. Interesting thing is, now when I go back to the normal drive mode, it says ready to drive, and in the bottom right there's a GT, which I presume is the G-track icon. It looks like everything's good to go, but then as soon as I actually push the joystick to drive somewhere, it suddenly says control inhibited again, and now in the bottom right we have that warning icon. Okay, I figured it out. It was very simple really. It was just this wire that I'd cut for the tilt sensor of the chair that was saying control inhibited. It turns out that to be enabled it needs to be closed, not open, so I just twisted those wires together, and now when I turn it on I get a nice ready to drive straight away. So I've just drove it just about 20 meters up there and back, and it is really slow, even on the highest speed setting, even though the battery is reading a pretty decent level there. There you go. Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to be that slow, so maybe these batteries are just not able to pump out that much power, even though this battery meter is reading a decent level. So I'll charge them overnight again, I think, because they did only have about 6 hours on that this 24 volt charger there, so it's probably not much, and it did still say it wasn't finished charging, so I'll let that run overnight. I think it is extremely controllable, very smooth, and it has a little sort of a you can hear the relay clicking on and off when it starts, so see how slow it is to pick up. That's speed 2. Real slow. And no matter which speed setting I put it on, it seems to be about the same for every setting. When you let it go, it does this other click again. Well, silly me, I was completely forgetting about this control here, the tortoise and the rabbit, and I had it on tortoise the whole time just then. But if I put it on rabbit and level 3, it's actually pretty decent. Oh, it's a strong brake, but it's definitely much faster. Well, oh, hey. I think I'll finish this video here. Very happy with the progress so far. So it turns out that the only thing that was wrong with it was the batteries were flat, and that's it. So I'm feeling quite lucky now. I mean, when you buy something like this in an online auction, you never quite know what you're in for. It might just turn out to be a pile of shit, but this one turned out to be quite good. If you buy these in a working condition, or especially if you buy a new one, they're pretty expensive. But somebody asked me how much did I pay for it. I paid 360 New Zealand dollars. Not sure what that is in US, but 220, something like that maybe. Not much anyway. So I'm really happy with that. The batteries, I think, did I mention? I've been driving it for about 10 minutes and the batteries went from almost full to there. So they're not really in such great shape, but they'll be perfect for a bit of testing and riding around, and who knows, after a few more cycles maybe they might improve. I don't know how those lead acid batteries work. I had quite a few people tell me that I should try a Sabertooth dual ESC controller thing that interfaces with a typical radio control receiver. I'm gonna try not to do that because I already have this ESC here, and I think the reason that most people say that, or most people go for those Sabertooth ones, is just because it's not really easy to interface this one with your radio control stuff. But I'm cautiously optimistic that I will be able to figure out what's going on in this wire here. There's actually only 4 wires in there, which is quite interesting, so it could be just ground and power and 2 signal wires. If so, yeah, what if it's I squared C or something simple like that? That would be interesting. So I'm just hoping that when I put the scope on it and maybe logic analyzer and things like that on it to figure out what it's doing. It's 8-volt signals by the looks of it though, which is a bit of a nuisance. Just looking at one of the pins on the end of it, it's 8 volts, or 8 volts power. So I'm presuming 8 volts signal as well. I don't know. But the next video is probably going to be trying to figure out something to do with that. So it could be quite a bit of looking at computer screens and oscilloscope screens and logic analyzer stuff instead of out here in the garage tinkering with things. But it has to be done. Well, it doesn't have to be done, but I kind of like that kind of a challenge. So I'm not going to say that I'll be able to do it, but in theory it should be possible, right, if you put enough time and effort into it. So I'm going to give it my best and hopefully figure out some way to interface, say an Arduino or whatever, in place of that control unit, and ideally do everything that this control unit can do apart from display stuff on the screen. So like I say, rather optimistic perhaps, but anyway, that's going to be the subject for the next video. For now, I'll just thank you for watching and see you next time.